tested and it's winning. So
it's really exciting.
And then we launched our remove your covers just this last November, which is the modern machine maintenance. So it's literally getting into your machine, cleaning everything out, keeping.
I have signed up, and
yes,
it's on my list of things I need to do.
Yes, that will keep you going if you follow that program and keep.
Is that for? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
Is it for just what? So for I want to ask a couple of questions, follow-up questions. So one, the remove your covers is for.
That's modern maintenance. So it could be
that's
mechanical.
Modern. Are they just the computer ones, or also the mechanical? It's for the computer ones, right?
The way that I tend to separate them, there's not really a year that's a cutoff between vintage and modern. It's more of how you get into the machine. So if you have plastic covers on the machine that have to like come apart, that's much more complex than like a metal machine where it's just a lid that comes off. So if it's got plastic covers where things have to come off, that's usually a modern machine. Yeah.
And then the other question I have, which I always ask you, and so I like the idea of vintage machines, but I know nothing. And the question is, how do you get into that? And like, how do you find one? And how do you know, like, is it, I don't know any, I mean, like, I know
it's
nothing.
A very common question. It's I feel like, if you're into vintage machines, I know so many people are like, I love those. I like the idea of them. I'm kind of scared of them. Totally, I actually have 2 free programs on our website, which is sewingdocacademy.com. So one of them is getting started with vintage sewing machines. And that's going to walk you through, if you're going to look at one to buy, it'll give you a checklist of parts to make sure they're there. It gives you a picture so you know what you're looking for.
Great.
It's a 3-part video series, totally free.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And that's at sewingacademy.com. Is that what you said?
Yes. And it's right there on the front page. So it'll walk you through that. It'll walk you through basic threading and getting started. It walks you through basic cleaning and lubricating as well. So you can do all that before you get started. I have a second one that's coming out this week that'll also be free, that actually walks you through making good purchases on vintage machines.
I need that. I am so going to do that. We'll have to have a follow-up because I feel like I'm ready. I'm ready to go on an adventure. Here's my dream. So we do a lot on copyright, as you know, and really what I want to do is, and we do a lot on right now on like learning about what quilts are in the public domain. So I really want to reverse engineer. I think we've talked about this before, like a quilt from the 1880s with an 1880 machine. Like I want to like run the gamut of like, okay, well, this from 30s, and I want to know what it feels like and how it's different when you make a quilt. Like, why do these look different because of the machines or because of the time? So yeah, I'm really into like the machine going with the quilt, which sounds really like a lot of work. But I also think like,
but I like that idea because I do feel like you'd be able to gauge what it was like at different periods, because you even see bells and whistles appear in the 50s, what we would call bells and whistles back then, that now look like nothing. But that was a huge step up from just a straight stitch from a chain stitch. So I think that would be valuable.
Yeah, so that's the new dream, is making the, like, okay, we found this one. Now we can make all the 1930 quilts.
But we do get a lot of people asking, do you have, everybody's birth year seems, so especially in the realm of featherweights, we have a lot of people asking, do you ever find them in year 19, whatever, because that's the year I was born or my mother was born. And so people are very in the
on their birthday. And do you used to have a bunch of them. Do you still sell vintage machines, or are you out of that business?
Oh, I probably will. We have 3 storage buildings full of machines.
Really?
Yeah, when we closed our shop
come see you on a field trip. It would be so much fun. Seriously.
It is kind of, the storage units are a little scary, because when we closed our shop for good this last fall, everything went into storage units. And so we're keeping enough to teach with, because I still teach live, and I do videos. So we go and I have behind me, there's about 7 modern machines that I'm filming for people. So we constantly rotate, but as we're done with them, we definitely will sell them off at some point. That's kind of on hold, but I have tons of machines that I'm happy.
Oh my gosh. It's so cool. And you don't care do you care what, when you do the checklist when you buy a machine, or do they just come to you? Do they show up?
Oh, they used to just, for the first year, so back in we're talking like 2012, Goodwill's auction site was brand new and no one knew about it. So shopgoodwill.com. And they have these hubs all over the country where because if you take your old sewing machine to Goodwill, most of the time they'll tell you, no, we don't take sewing machines anymore. Some of them will say yes, but most of them are like, we can't sell them. So now they collect them and they go to this hub and then they do their auctions. Back then we had a hub in Nashville. So every time I would start to plan a trip home to St. Louis, I would get on, they would hold your machine for 2 weeks for you. So you'd purchase, then you could go and pick it up in person. I wouldn't have to pay shipping. I was buying machines for $3, $7, $4. So I would come home with machines. And then when word got out that I was starting to do this for people, everybody, I swear, cleaned out their closets and they would literally show up on our doorstep.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Like I was on my way home from church and I just left a machine on your porch. So we literally started multiplying really fast.
That is so crazy. I love that.
I still, to this day, we had a link on our website where we're like, if you have a machine that doesn't work, that don't throw it away. If you're willing to ship it to us or leave it for us, we like to take it. I'm getting probably 15 to 20 emails a week right now still.
Wow.
And we're closed. So there's a huge need to rescue machines, get them going and send them back.
Right. It's like a thing. That's very cool. Well, do you see people making a business out of, if they take your class, that they can find these cheap and refurbish and sell them? Is that kind of something you see?
I have people that I have 7 or 8 that started in our vintage program that now have their side business going. Those 7 have officially filed their name and gotten their business cards and are starting to do, small on the side.
Now, do you think you'll ever franchise?
Yes, that is definitely in our plan. And our goal is to be more mobile or low overhead. We're not encouraging people to open up full scale shops because that's where it dies, is definitely in the overhead. But our ambulances, once it's on the road, this is kind of a model that we want to use. Because mobile is huge. I mean, through COVID, I wish we had this thing going, because the number of elderly people that can't leave their home when the pandemic was going on, we could have done so much during that time.
Oh, that's so cool.
So we do want to do a franchise opportunity down the road for sure. And that's a little scary to think about, but it's definitely on.
Oh my gosh, you'll have to come back to us and talk to us about it.
I really feel like at this stage that can happen. So
totally. Okay. So also, how is the family? How's the fam?
We're good. I feel like we've been grinding this thing out for 5 years in this space. And I always worry about my son because we homeschool and he's 13 now. I don't know how this happened. He's taller than both of us, which is crazy. But he is so patient and so, I'm so grateful for him, because I feel like he's kind of sacrificed so much.
I know. I felt that way with Sid.
And I know you do. That's something we've always related on. I know he's good and he's learned a lot from it, but I always feel like, how much is he missing out on?
I know.
So I
think he'll tell you. So we had this conversation. We were driving around one day in the summer, and then Sid just started telling me things that was like, oh, really? She's. So maybe at about 19, 20, he'll tell you what he was missing out on. Because,
Oh, I'm sure.
It was really, it was like a thoughtful, it wasn't like, and you da-da-da. But we were talking about something and that triggered like, well, I knew you didn't have a lot of money. So I just asked for a basketball. I didn't want to impose on us. And I was like, oh, you knew that? Right. It's like this little, she's like, well, I know that when I stopped having Monster High dolls, because that was when I knew that we were struggling. I stopped asking, and I didn't get any of the ones after that date.
Aww.
And I was like, oh, really?
I know. I think we're on the edge of feeling that.
Her little mind, right? She was like, I don't want to put a burden on the family. And I was just like blown away by it. So, I mean, when you have a thoughtful kid and but also they're also really good with money, and they're really careful, and they're also so mature. Like, they get sort of how businesses work and how everything else, and now we're writing a book together. It's four books together. And that's just a dream, but it's interesting. It'll be interesting once he's older, what conversations you have about this time. And they weren't mad. They were just kind of ready to say something about what they thought about when they're as a kid, I
feel like we've always had very similar parenting styles about things. And I know that you've always raised it to be very open and in a safe space where she could talk about anything. And that's kind of how we are. And I feel like there's not a lot that would blindside me, but I feel like the same way as you is that maybe his awareness sometimes, I think he does absorb more than we realize sometimes, because kids get that point where their selective hearing really kicks in and you really think they start to not hear you at all.
Right.
And then he'll say something and be like, oh my gosh, he did listen that day. Like, you know,
exactly.
That he did absorb that. So we're always conscious of that. He is definitely absorbing more from real life and from business than I probably give him credit for sometimes.
Oh, imagine it so much. And that's going to serve him well, whatever he does. And to really see what it takes to get a business up and running. I mean, I think that's part of what the entrepreneurial experience does. It is really hard. And you have to, I mean, your thing about like, I really didn't love the shop. Like that isn't like, oh, well, I have to love what I do, but you don't know how hard it is.
Yeah.
So you know what I'm saying? Like the reason you have to love it is because it is so hard that if you're going to work this hard, not have an income coming in, you really do have to love it because you're doing it for passion, not for economics. And so that really struck me.
I feel like you're going to be faced at some point with really hard decisions that you feel like, well, you know, we've heard, if you've ever read any books of any entrepreneurs, you read books about people that couch surfed, like they slept on friends' couches because they didn't have rent to pay.
Right.
We've been in an RV for 4 years. We're going on 4 years of being almost 5 actually. And it was not meant to be this long, but we would not have survived COVID without that decision, you know? And I mean, like we had to make a choice between continuing to pay a mortgage we couldn't afford and all go back to corporate America and we lose all our progress, or we decided to minimize to the absolute bare minimum.
Right. What are your expenses?
And so that's where my guilt with Aaron comes in. But the 3 of us love each other and like our company. So we're doing okay in small space. But I feel like when you're faced with, you could potentially have to give up your home. You have to give up all these sacrifices. There's going to come a point where you realize, do we keep going or do we back down? And thankfully.
Well, and it's the growth part that's so interesting. Like people can start businesses easy. You could kind of get sort of enough of a following going. I think anybody can do that now.
Especially now.
That point after that, where you grow and you can't do your full-time job, but you don't have enough people to do.
That was us.
Yeah. And then you have to leap in this crazy way or stop.
Oh, it's the scariest thing we've ever done. And with a kid, you know, and I'm like, we didn't have that safety net anymore, but it was the best decision we ever made, because until even when we closed the actual shop after 13 years, I closed my actual service shop and I loved it, but we had to give up that because it was dominating our everyday. And that was that was even scarier than Paul leaving his job originally.
Because you knew it was income coming in and you could depend on it. And now you were putting all your eggs.
Technically, we were only paying rent and gas. So I don't know that we were really reaping much, you know, profit after that. But it was like, we had to make this decision. It was really scary because we started to feel the academy was coming together, but there's so many unknowns. Like we took the leap and I have no regrets. I mean, I'm proud of us and I'm proud of Aaron, because Aaron never once said, you know, I'm tired of living like this and we need to do something different. He's been part of our journey. So I
think that's so great.
The ups and downs, you probably know there's so many times every day you're like, what am I doing? Like, why are we doing this? And then something happens. You're like, this is why we do this, because no, because you change lives. I mean, you have to go beyond the dollar. If you're in any entrepreneurial situation just for the dollar, it's never going to happen. It's got to be from.
No, there's just a lot of easier ways to make money. It's not for wimps.
No, the ups and downs and the emotional, like today there's money and tomorrow there's not, is so. I'm this many years in, I'm still not great at it.
No. And I mean, I have to say, you know, we have. Like I'm a professor, so we have like income, you know, I don't depend. I mean, and that gives us a lot of freedom, but I think that, you know, you see that a lot and I think that's okay. I mean, you know, I think
for sure.
After doing all of these interviews, recognizing where you fit in the ecosystem and what it is and what you need to do, it isn't like somehow you're better than somebody else or you're worse than somebody else. It's just the circumstance. Like when you had the shop, you had a way to have the shop because you had support, and we just have to sort of recognize what that is. And I don't know, I find it very, very stressful. All of it very stressful. I feel like there's never a time when you're not supposed to be doing something, and that you can never measure up to what the requirements are of this ridiculous world, social media and all the other stuff. And like, you know, all of it, there's a lot. It's just a lot. So you do have to.
And if you're a severe people pleaser, I'm definitely an empath. And because of my childhood, I'm a severe recovering people pleaser.
Yeah.
You also have to, I don't know, I feel like it's a big emotional adjustment, because now when you're charging people money for your services, it takes it to a different level, where there's so many times where I'm like, it's never enough. On my side, they think it's great. And I'm like, but it should be so much more. So I'm the type of person, I have to really monitor my mental health on, this is what I owe you. This is what I do.